All right. The surfing podcast world's favorite segment is back for the fifth and final time. I know it's very sad, but this is the last lineup time machine before the championship tour resumes and we embark on the pathway to the very first WSL Finals. So, quick refresher for the audience, the time machine is Pat and I speculating on how the world title determination would have gone down in previous years with the forthcoming WSL Finals format. Last month, we ran through the theoretical 1998 contenders at NIAS and determined that Lane Beachley and Kelly Slater would have still likely won their respective world titles that year. For today's time machine, we're going to take the year-end ratings from 2019, the last time we actually ran competition, which I was going through it felt like 20 years ago. And we're going to run the final 5 men and final 5 women through the WSL Finals format and speculate who comes out on top. And we will ask the question, what might have happened if the new format was in place way back in 2019? So same disclaimer as the prior time machines. We're obviously aware that all the year-end rankings don't take into account future schedules, formats, judging criteria, mid-season cuts, etc. But we are operating the time machine based on how those years finished at the time. First things first, as we have said each and every time we've done this, the venue obviously plays a huge role in the final event. And now, as we've just discussed, for the first time ever, we have a venue for the inaugural WSL Finals. That venue is Lower Trestles. So we're going to go through the 2019 year-end rankings for the theoretical WSL Finals held at Lower Trestles. Whew, mouthful. First things first. The surfers who miss out. I like doing this just from a perspective standpoint. The number 6 surfers who would have missed out on this year's time machine were Tatiana Weston Webb from Brazil and Kauai, and Kanoa Igarashi from Japan and Huntington Beach. Do you think either of them, had they snuck into the top 5, do you think they would have done some damage at Lower Trestles?
I mean, yeah, they certainly could have. I don't think either of them would have run the gamut. I think there's 2 names that, outside of those that aren't mentioned, certainly Tyler Wright, who had an amazing performance at Honolulu on her first event back. And then obviously John, who was on a tear, who wasn't able to compete. So I think those are interesting ones from last year. And again, it feels like 20 years ago. But yeah, it's interesting as we think about those top 5 surfers and what transpires through the year. I just would say those are honorable mentions.
Absolutely. And you and I have actually talked about this before on this podcast, but Lower Trestles has so many different moods, in terms of performance. You mentioned the Luke Egan year. It was well overhead and bombing. There's been other years where it's been sort of light wind crumbles and like 3 to 5 feet. Let's land on some conditions for this year's time machine. What are you recommending we go with in terms of the ideal performance-based Lower Trestles?
Well, I'm going to go nostalgic. I'm going to do the Kelly Slater black and white days. I think that New Zealand swell, it's got south and a little bit of west. I think, part of the thing that we get into in September are chances of getting a hurricane, which was the Luke Egan year. Those are better. So we sort of get multiple shots at a decent swell. I don't love the direction on a hurricane. What happens is it sort of pushes the left out to sea a little bit, and the right really does bend a bit more. I like that real classic sort of lowers where you can go both ways. So I'm going to say, 3 to 5 feet, New Zealand swell, tide. We want tide, not super high tide. But again, we only have, 4 to 6 hours at the most. So we can cherry pick. We would probably start in the 9 o'clock and finish 2 o'clock, in the afternoon before the tide rushes out too far. So I'm getting very specific because I think we can.
Yeah, I really like it. Kelly Slater did not finish in the top 5, but he's still influencing the conditions for the WSL Finals. I'm all for it. So the surfers that did get in on the women's side, 5th to 1st, Sally Fitzgibbons, Stephanie Gilmore, Lakey Peterson, Caroline Marks, and Carissa Moore. And on the men's side, Kalohe Andino, Felipe Toledo, Jordy Smith, Gabriel Medina, Italo Ferreira. Both really gnarly fields for Lower Trestles. But match 1 is going to be seed number 4 on the women's, which was Stephanie Gilmore, up against seed number 5, Sally Fitzgibbons. Who do you have?
See, this is where it gets so sick. That's a great heat. That's a great heat. And the one thing what I enjoy about this is, I think Steph, when she's motivated and focused, she's, just the most beautiful surfer in the world to watch. And if this doesn't get her motivated, I don't know what does, right? So, there's a bit of nerves and everything. But if Steph can sort of channel that raw ability and she has, I think she wins that heat. It just, is the moment going to be so big that it overcomes her, or does she find her best? Because I still think about the 10-point ride she had, and I think 2016 at Lowers is just being a classic. So I think it would be hard to beat her.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Sally's another one that could rise to the occasion, certainly when the pressure's on, in sort of a one-day event. I just look at, if we're going off the results in 2019, like she finished the year with 5 fifths in a row, and for whatever reason, she just couldn't break out of the quarters in the back half there. Not that has to overly influence how she'd perform at the WSL Finals, but I'm with you. I think like Steph's power and her ability to win is gonna give her the win in match one. So Steph Gilmore, we've got Steph over Sally for match one at the 2019 WSL Finals. Match two, two of your former wards at Hurley. So you have to choose your child that's going to die here. Felipe Toledo, the number 4 seed on the men's, versus Kolohe Andino, the number 5 seed on the men's. Kolohe in his backyard, and it's Felipe's backyard too now since he moved there. So you get to go first on this one, sir.
There is no good answer to this one. I mean, look,
who's not gonna respond to your text next is what we're going with.
Hey, so I think brother being in the top 5, the amount of community support would be through the roof. He will definitely be up for that heat. And again, it just, Felipe's that guy that you just sort of go, he could sort of do anything. He's sort of the favorite at Trestles in a lot of ways. So it's a really tough heat. I may actually surprise you and lean on the brother side. And like the reason I would say is where I'm envisioning is sort of, those sunny early mornings, and it's actually a bit offshore in the morning, where I think brother can get in there on the face and lay in some really good turns. I think if there's slight crumble, I think Felipe does backflips all day. But I think the way I see Kolohe surfing now, where he's really pinpointing that and kind of that combo, it's a look. That's a toss-up. I mean, it's a lot of people will say Felipe wins that heat, but I may go a little off the reservation and take Kolohe.
I think this is our 5th time doing this. This may be the gnarliest first men's matchup of the Time Machine WSL Finals we've seen. Felipe Toledo versus Kolohe Andino at Lower Trestles. Yeah. I not to lockstep with you the whole time. I'm going to give it to Kolohe as well, even though, again, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are like, you guys are tripping. Yeah. Felipe at the end of 2009 was nursing a back injury, and he was just looking a little slower. And I think if you look at Kolohe's form last year, he finished in a controversial final, right, against Italo at the first event at Deba. He finished second again at Margaret River. I think his rail surfing was on point in 2019. I think he's just worked really hard on his fitness, and he I don't know if he's ever performed super well at Lower Trestles, even when it was a CT. But I just kind of like, we could be wrong, and he could kind of continue that trend, and the pressure of being home's too much. But I'm going to give it to him in our hypothetical, because I think he's gonna kind of get the monkey off his back there and do well, and really strike a win for the locals there, because it's been a while for them.
Yep.
Match 3, we have number 3 women's seed Lakey Peterson against your and my match 1 winner Steph Gilmore. What do you think?
let's remember too that this in 2019 was for Olympic spot, which is another for the top three ladies are U.S. surfers, and the top two would have been going to the Olympics. So this is added pressure for Lakey, and so. Yeah, this is a tough heat. And again, I think Lakey is very, very competitive with Steph. As far, I think they have certain things that they have in common. I think they both, grew up at right points. Lakey's strength is in a similar place as Steph. And this just goes to how good I think Steph is. I just think Steph has that extra 20% on almost the whole field. And this isn't a shot at Lakey because I think Lakey could run it. If Steph gets through that heat with Sally and can get a little momentum, I think she's going to be tough to beat. So I'm going to go that way, knowing full well that Steph may have nerves and melt down and not get through Sally either. But I'm playing off of black and white. I'm thinking about beautiful conditions, and I'd love to see Steph doing her big arcs and sort of putting that surfing together.
I back the call. I'm going to depart from you here, and the reason I am is because, and maybe the only reason I am is because I was refreshed at how well Lakey can perform at Lower Trestles. Pretty recently, actually, we did a rear view, and we watched her heat against Carissa. I think it was 2017. Yeah. And I remember being like blown away when it happened. But there's so much good surfing every year that you have to go dust through the cobwebs to kind of find it. And I watched it with her. We were up at Surf Ranch for the Rumble at the Ranch when we were doing the podcast. And I was just like, kind of my jaw was on the ground at how well she surfed. I think she spends a lot of time at lowers, obviously. She's worked really hard on her boards. I think it's an interesting thing you raised on the Olympic pressure, because that's something that I think understandably, and she's talked about as well, played into her performance in Maui last year. But I think at lowers, it's a different game. So I'm gonna give match 3 to Lakey over Steph.
I'm gonna stick with what I said. But one thing I will say to you that I remember that heat really well. One thing that Lakey has going for her, and if she listens to this, when she's aggressive, it is a separator for her. Mm-hmm. I think if she tries to match Steph on style and all of that stuff, Steph just has so much flow, and I think of that. But that's not necessarily always what scores. So I think if Lakey gets out there and is more aggressive, I think it goes the way that you just said. So I'm not going to change my opinion, but I like what you said.
Match 4, Jordy Smith versus, for both of us, the match 2 winner, Kolohe Andino.
Yeah, Jordy is so powerful. And when we watched him win, did he win in 2015 or 16 or 2000?
Yeah, over Felipe, right?
Yeah. He also won
over John, right?
Yeah, he won. He beat John as well. One of the years it was real small, and he rode this little swallowtail that just he was lightning quick. I think Jordy has the ability to adapt to sort of all the conditions out there. I think it's hard to get past Jordy out there.
I'm with you. It's interesting even just kind of looking at this heat, because when you think of the weapons each of them have, they're actually pretty similar, right? Like they're amazing rail surfers. They're really good at loosing the tail. They're good aerialists. Jordy is just kind of physically bigger, and he's like a proven winner. And I think he's worked a ton on his body, and as has Kolohe, and a ton on his equipment. And I think that if we're giving Kolohe a pass over Toledo on the nerves, I think this is where they kick in. And I think Jordy kind of is like the alpha in this situation comes through, because I think they're pretty equal on weapons. I don't think there's something that Kolohe can pull out to kind of challenge him. So I'm going to go with Jordy as well.
One thing I would say, and again, this goes into conditions. I'm thinking sort of forehand versus forehand. One thing that I think Kolohe has as a step up on Jordy is his backhand. So
that's a good point.
If Kolohe ends up going left, which is quicker than going right, you get out faster, and does allow for a little bit more acrobatic and aerial surfing a lot of times. And again, goes into swell direction and stuff. I think Brother Man has a better chance there. I think his backhand is freaking lethal. So, and as we know, anytime like when it's man-on-man competition, you really are pitting one person against the other. So you're comparing. And I think if they do end up going left, I think Brother has a better chance.
That's a really interesting point too, right? Because so far in our time machine, we haven't seen any goofy footers. So hypothetically, you could be like, everyone's gone right, like so far for the whole day. And so if a good left comes through and Brother is taking your guidance here and he hammers one like that could be a big point of difference for what the judges have seen all day, and that could turn it. So it's interesting insight in terms of how does Brother beat Jordy at lowers. I like it.
I have one other funny piece of just thinking about this out loud is, so as you know, Dave, you've been down there, there's no beach left. And so where we typically set up, I think there's an interesting thing to where, like I was thinking about, the left doesn't always score as good as the right. It seems like the right offers more opportunity, which equals more opportunity to score. But it's also point two. So where the judges have always sat, they sit to where the right looks a little steeper than maybe it really is. Right. I wonder if we have to move where the judges are. And so the left looks, maybe it's moved back a little bit. Just point of view can absolutely change somebody's opinion of what they're seeing.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the theory with backdoor always scores a point higher than pipe because you can't see how deep the person is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean all those little things impact. So interesting. Okay, match 5, Caroline Marks versus for you, Stephanie Gilmore, and for me, Lakey Peterson. How does Caroline go against Steph in match 5?
Well, here's where you get into really different looks, and this is kind of what I was saying is that as we went into that with Lakey and again, Lakey's more aggressive than Steph. That she gets, you really have to accentuate. And why I think Trestles works is it allows you to really play up what your difference and what your strong point is versus the other competitor. And it's about you, not necessarily about the wave. This is where I think Caroline's backhand really comes into play because she's more vertical and she does turn through her backhand better than almost anybody, really, men and women. Her backhand is like they just say, it looks like hockey, which is a huge compliment. But I just think this is a really, really great battle. And I'm going to go into if it's sort of 5 foot, and when I say 5 foot, I mean it's well overhead on the sets. I keep thinking about Steph laying out those big arcs, and maybe I'm just too high on that idea. But if she can do that, I think I think that it's a 2-person race, and ultimately it's going to be her and Carissa in the final in my eyes. If it's anything unlike that, and conditions are a little bit, I just think Caroline at her worst is going to put up 2 7-5s or 8s on her back. Mm-hmm. It's just that good. I think I guess the way I look at it is Caroline's going to put up, 15 points. Steph has to beat that.
Mm-hmm. So who's your pick?
Steph.
I agree with all that analysis. I think it's really, really good. So I have Caroline versus Lakey. Similar in that it's interesting. Like we're both talking about rights. You were comparing Caroline's backhand versus Steph's forehand on the same canvas, right? It wouldn't be Caroline's forehand on the left, I think, at this point. I'm the same way. Like I think it's Lakey's forehand on the right versus Caroline's backhand on the right. And I think kind of what we talked about before, she does go more vertical than almost any surfer on tour, and certainly through a top turn. And it's going to be such a point of difference. She'll be the first goofy footer the judges have seen for the day. I think she's going to beat Lakey on my trajectory. So I'm going to give that one to Caroline for match 5.
But one thing I'll say is, and maybe just because it's so close to us now as far as timing, these are definitely the tightest. Like I don't feel like any of these are foregone conclusions. Like I could easily see every decision going the opposite way because I'm a huge Caroline fan. Like I just think she's amazing. I think she's going to win multiple world titles. I don't know why. I guess when I started the Kelly Slater black and white, I really started sort of envisioning I've been going that
Who's
route.
wearing star trunks? That person wins. I don't know. All right. So match 6, Gabriel Medina versus, for you and I, Jordy Smith.
So Gabriel has traditionally not performed amazing at Trestles, and I I'll be one to say that I thought that he probably won the heat in 2016, that he lost to Tanner. I was I can say that because I wasn't working at the company then. But I thought, you
can say it anyway. We're not judges.
We're not judges. Yeah.
We're straight shooters right down the middle. That's how we call it. Yeah.
Yeah. Nonpartisan.
Respected on both sides.
Right. So I've always been surprised that Gabriel hasn't performed better at Trestles, because I think that if he's not the best performing surfer in the world, he's right there. And so one thing that I've been surprised about Gabriel at Trestles typically is he tends to not go and utilize his aerial surfing on the lefts. I remember a heat that him and Ace had, that Ace won. And Ace got a couple good rights, and Gabriel kept going right and not getting the right one. And then he finally went left and got a big score and got himself back in the heat. And I keep falling back on this thing as you are comparing one thing versus the other. And so I would say if Gabriel can kind of go on the left and do a couple, big airs or some spins or something that sort of breaks what you're seeing from Jordy and those big arcs, I think Gabriel gets the win.
So you're going with Gabriel?
I'm going to go with Gabriel.
It's funny, like it's almost, he's so good at everything, and he has the deepest bag of tricks. I wonder, because Trestles and Lowers is such a perfect canvas, if there's a bit of decision paralysis for him historically, where it's like he could do anything, and I think that I'm not a play armchair psychologist, but it's like he could look at the left and be like, nah, the left typically doesn't score as high. Yeah, I could go out there and do like a Superman air and do a comp, like I do a billion things, but I know I need to surf the right. And I think he gets kind of sucked into the right. It's interesting too, like, and that's when he really relies on his like rail game and power surfing, which is world class. I don't really recall him like going to the air early on any rights, and it's one of those things where it's like all the talent in the world, you could just load up a huge straight punt on a right and really set the tone differently for this heat, and then go into like your like 12 o'clock hits, to finish the wave. But I just haven't seen him do it. I think between him and Jordy, just hypothetically for my pick, Jordy keeps him focused on the rights, and Jordy's able to create a point of difference because Jordy will like loose the tail and really kind of perform. Again, like we could call this 99 times and it could bounce back and forth. Like these guys are so good, but I'm going to give it to Jordy is my pick. For this
I think it's interesting what you said though, is that Jordy will keep him on the rights. So in other words, they will have to play against each other. And so if one person's going right, then it's like, well, I can't give them all the rights. And so I think that's an important part of how they play these heats out.
Totally. So now we're down to the women's final, and we have the number 1 women's seed, Carissa Moore, versus, for you, Steph Gilmore, best 2 out of 3. Who takes the 2019 world title if we run it at Lower Trestles?
Well, I think Carissa wins. So I'm not sure how the matches go. I think she wins. She was so strong last year. She and I'm also, again, buoyed by the fact that she was in California practicing for a period of time, and she looked sharp as stack. Like she looked amazing. She is someone that can match sort of Steph on that open face. But in her moment, she actually has that next little flare. And so I think, and Steph has surfed quite a few heats, which may be helpful. Trestles isn't like you're dead tired. But at 35-minute heat, she's already had a few under her belt. I think she wears out, and I think Carissa gets her.
You've obviously worked with Carissa a lot. I'm curious, in this hypothetical scenario, one day for the world title at Lower Trestles, how is she in terms of psychological strength and dealing with pressure compared to other surfers on tour? I'm just curious. I don't have an opinion. I'm going to go with Carissa over Caroline for me too, just based on raw talent and her ability as a proven winner. But I'm just curious what your read is on the pressure of a one-day world title event.
I think Chris is streaky in that, like, she needs when she gets on a positive sort of vibe, it's hard to stop her. So the only thing I would say, it's almost if she came in at second or third and sort of built momentum through the day,
right,
would almost be would play into her world a little bit easier. But I do think that she gets 3 chances. She's got to win 2 of the 3. I think, by her performance through the year, she's going to feel that confidence. So that's what I'm going on. But I do think Carissa is streaky in the sense she wants to get her feet in the wax and kind of get moving. So, maybe it goes 3 heats, but I think she's there.
Yeah, I feel similar. Like, I think this is going to be so interesting every time we do this with the number 1 seed, because you kind of have to wait at the end of the dance hall and like watch this person potentially kind of rampaging through the field all day and getting like warm and loose and potentially tired.
Yep.
But they get to you and you're like, oh man, it's like surfed since this morning. Like, and Jesus, did you see what that person, like you could get a bit of shell shock if you're the number 1 seed in that first heat. So, but I'm with you. I think if it goes 3 heats, she wins. I think she's so good out there. Men's final. So the men's final, we have number 1 seed Italo Ferreira for you versus Gabriel Medina at Lower Trestles. Best 2 out of 3. Who takes it?
Well, and this, here's my bias coming out, because Italo rides Timmy Patterson's, and he's local surfer or local shaper. I think Italo wins. I think Italo, you made a great point earlier in speaking about Gabriel. I think where, you had mentioned you hadn't seen Gabriel go out and do that first move, big air. I kind of think back to Bali, where, Italo did that and, then hammered it 6 times after. I just think he is so acrobatic that Trestles it becomes sort of, a skate ramp for him. And I think we start to see surfing that you put him out there 3 heats in a row. I think we're going to see something we hadn't seen. And so that's what's exciting to me about this format is I think the 2 boys will push each other. And we're going to we'll see that sort of battle like we've never seen.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you. Like, I think it's you took my point on his ability to adapt and really innovate. And he's just like, it's funny. I had this exact conversation with someone like a couple days ago about like Italo versus Gabriel at Lower Trestles. And the person was like, Gabe, all day long. And I'm like, I don't think so. Not at Lowers, just because Italo is so light on his feet. Like, and it's not a situation, I'm trying to remember where they had a final, if it was at J-Bay or Bell's, it was one of those. It was huge, right? And I think Gabe won, but it was like Gabe was using however big he is, like 6'1", 185 pounds of muscle, right? On all of his bottom turns. And it's not that Italo's not strong himself, but he's smaller, right? So like Gabe's power was really suited for those bigger waves, like freight train kind of waves. And I think that may be a little bit of a hindrance at Lower Trestles because it is high performance, but it doesn't have that like Jeffreys Bay freight train power, right? Yeah. Exactly. And I think that Italo's sort of lightness and adaptability and its ability to kind of do anything he wants on a wave is going to suit him really, really well. And so I had him over Jordy in 2 would be my guess. Lefts, rights, like whatever. I think, and I'd love to see it go 3 heats because I think it is one of those situations where if he's in the final, you're going to see something you've never seen in surfing because he just seems to perform when the pressure's on.
I think so too. And I keep harping on this, but this is the beauty of those 1-to-1 matchups, because I just think if in my version, it's Gabriel and Italo, and someone goes left and does a backflip or does something that, then the next person kind of has to do that. Like all of a sudden you've set the scale, and it's like, because, you had mentioned Jordy going right, and then Gabriel has to kind of defend and go right. Well, I think when, the 2 goofy foot surfers out there and that little northwest wind starts to blow up the face on the left and the right is glassy, well, all of a sudden the left becomes like bungee jumping for those guys, and they just start going for it, and someone lands something crazy, and it becomes a game of skate, and yeah. Who knows where we go?
Well, I'm excited. So this was our fifth and final time machine, because now we're going to get to see it in real life with the start of the 2021 championship tour. But I hope everyone enjoyed those. I certainly enjoyed doing those with you, Pat.
Do you like that? Well, if so, subscribe over there and then watch more videos over there. And then tell us your favorite videos down there. It's a 3-step process. Do them all now.